Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where over a decade after Warner Brothers said to themselves, maybe we should let Christopher Nolan take a crack at Batman, it would seem that studios are finally realizing that putting top-notch talent on their blockbusters rather than cheap and/or controllable talent was the right call all along. Yes, you haven't seen a lot of Nolan-esque talent on these blockbusters post The Dark Knight, where he really came into his own as a blockbuster director and I think changed the genre forever. But, nobody really followed suit with that, which has been, quite interesting. In fact, we're seeing, I think, directors get more and more inexperienced and less well-known. For instance, what the heck ever happened to George Miller post Mad Max Fury Road? No project ever materialized, despite plenty of rumors. But it would seem that two very talented individuals are now in talks to join blockbusters, and so I guess, again, a decade after Nolan, but I guess better late than never, right? Although, to be fair, J.A. Bayona is doing Jurassic World 2, and he's incredibly talented, and I think certainly a Nolan-esque hire. And also, if David Fincher ever does decide to do World War Z, that would be a similar scenario. We'll see. Jordan Vogt-Roberts, I think, did a very strong job with Kong Skull Island. It had some story problems. But he is, he's cheap talent. He came from nowhere. He didn't really have a strong track record. He certainly doesn't have the bargaining position or creative positioning now that Jordan Peele has post Get Out, and he's of course the focus of our first story. Now, I told you guys that he's been holding out for something big. I said he must, because he would have signed a deal by now with these numbers that Get Out has been posting at the box office. And it's, he has the whole shebang. He has not only the box office, but he has the critic appraisal as well. So if he didn't sew up a deal immediately, it's because he was, as I have been saying, holding out for something big. And oh boy, not only was I right, I was really right, because the rumor going around CinemaCon, that's the convention for studios to show their wares to the theater owners, so distributors. The distributors give their movies to theaters. But anyway, the rumor circulating is that Warner Brothers wants Jordan Peele to direct a live-action Akira. That's an absolutely fabulous idea. I think it's a great idea, and there are a lot of moving parts to such a deal, not only in terms of Jordan Peele, but also what it would mean for him, what it would mean for the business, and what it would mean for directors of color. Let's start out there. This would put him in the same category as Ryan Coogler on Black Panther and Ava DuVernay on A Wrinkle in Time, and that is directors of color going on to non-color, let's say, specific demographic projects, right? I mean, this is something that would be meant to be a 4-quadrant film. And Get Out ended up being a 4-quadrant film, and I'm sure that has helped him in his negotiations and why also Warner Bros. Was interested in him in the first place. Antoine Fuqua was supposed to be part of this group with Magnificent Seven, that remake, but Antoine Fuqua unfortunately turned that into a B picture. So I cannot put him in the same category as Coogler, DuVernay, and Jordan Peele. Now, Ryan Coogler's Black Panther, of course, is inherently diverse because it's a story that takes place in the African nation of Wakanda. But Ava DuVernay has gone to great lengths to make her A Wrinkle in Time very diverse. And Akira, the big problem, the big hurdle for that is whether or not it will be whitewashed. And so I think that Jordan Peele is a fantastic choice to direct it, not only because I think he'll do a good job, but because I think he will never allow that to happen. By the way, on a side note, I believe Christopher Nolan is producing the live-action Akira, so Jordan Peele would be partially his hire. Although he didn't leave the DCEU in such great hands. He helped do the transition. But if you watch The Dark Knight The Dark Knight Rises, you can clearly see that Christopher Nolan is totally done with making that kind of movie. I mean, I think he only made The Dark Knight Rises so he could make Inception, and I think that one of his rare unprofessional moments really shows in the film that he delivered, the Batman film that he delivered. But anyway, so Akira. So I think that Jordan Peele, one of the best things that he has is that he is not tone deaf. Unlike a lot of people who work in Hollywood, he understands the audience that he is making a product for. He understands the online discussion, because you can see that reflected in his brilliant sketch work that he did with Keegan-Michael Key. So I think that he will understand what people want to see out of the live-action Akira and don't want to see out of a live-action Akira, and he can navigate those waters, I think, really well. And I think he also, though, understands from a business perspective, because I think Get Out is constructed very well from a business perspective itself, what he needs to do to make the studio happy, to make sure that big audience turns out, but also not to get tripped up by this, again, this whitewashing situation. So I think he'll be able to balance the diversity perfectly, and he'll understand why he needs to do that. He's not going to be some studio executive who's like, I don't understand these people on the internet. Jordan Peele is a person from the internet, basically, considering the strength of the sketches online. So also, I'd be very curious to see how the Akira discussions move forward after we see what happens with Ghost in the Shell's weekend box office. Ghost in the Shell, I think, is a real wild card. The reviews seem very split. I'm going to see it tonight. My review will go up tomorrow, but we'll also have to see what the box office looks like as well. If they really want a scapegoat, they can blame Scarlett Johansson, which will be very sad because she'll also hurt female leads, their bargaining power. But it might put Jordan Peele, I think this will a Jordan Peele Akira produced by Christopher Nolan will move forward no matter what happens with Ghost in the Shell, but it would lower the expectations for it significantly, which would really work in Jordan Peele's favor. Also, Blade Runner 2049, I think, will be a major, the hype for that will keep Akira as a hot property on its own. So anyway, I think that the question is, can Jordan Peele handle such an ambitious project? Akira is incredibly, incredibly ambitious. I think that he can. I think you can see again from the sketch show, he's always been ambitious, along with Keegan-Michael Key. Get Out is a very ambitious film. And I think as long as he surrounds himself with good people, talented people, his first assistant director, his cinematographer, his visual effects supervisors. I think if all those people are really good, and I would like to point out a very good screenwriter. I think Jordan Peele will be able to tell if the screenplay is any good, but I had some problems with his third act on Get Out. I wouldn't trust Jordan Peele to handle the screenplay himself, but I would trust him to judge the screenplay. So I think as long, and especially with Christopher Nolan's involvement, I think this is a really sexy package. All right, so that's the first story of the day, and boy, that's fantastic for Jordan Peele. His ability of both him and his management team to negotiate Get Out and to make sure he got the most out of that situation, if he really does land the Akira gig, would be legendary. That would be just brilliantly played. It would be like a beautiful hand of poker or a business negotiating deal. It would be amazing. Gordon Gekko would be mighty impressed. All right, so anyway, next story of the day is that Aaron Sorkin is making his own headlines, doing an interview recently and saying, I have to meet with Marvel and DC, and it's really awkward telling them that I don't read comics. Well, I thought that was a really disrespectful thing to say. A couple of you have asked me about this. The reason I feel it's disrespectful is something so often someone would walk into a meeting and be asked, whether or not they're interested in adapting some source material, be it a book, a movie, a TV series, a toy line, and I doubt they go, well, I've never heard of that. I didn't read that book. I've never watched that TV show. If you get the deal and you're interested in it, you'll go do the research that's necessary. So for Aaron Sorkin to be like, I'm not a comic book guy, that's so foreign to me, just seems absolutely ridiculous. It's a little bit like what Mel Gibson's been saying with Suicide Squad, saying I don't really feel like I know the source material, so therefore I'm nervous to take it on. I think that really means in both cases is that I don't really respect the source material, so I'm not sure if this is something I want to get into. Now, Aaron Sorkin is a brilliant writer, but I think that he's proven time and time again that he will go anywhere to make a buck. So his flippant tone says to me that the meetings, they might not be that genuine. They might be exploratory. I think maybe his agents are like, hey, you want to go talk to Marvel and DC? And they ask Marvel and DC, and Marvel and DC are like, of course we want to talk to Aaron Sorkin, just to do it, just got to, because, he's a great writer out of respect. So the meeting might take place just for the meeting to take place. And also, speaking of money, Aaron Sorkin might be thinking, I don't have any respect for this, but I'm going to go to the meeting and let me see how big of a paycheck they wave in front of my face. Because for the right amount of money, yeah, I'd write a Marvel or DC movie, right? So the question is, would either Marvel or DC pay enough money to make Aaron Sorkin be interested in writing a comic book movie? I don't think Marvel needs to. I think Marvel's obviously doing quite well. DC should consider it because I think their scripts are their weakest part of their films. So I would consider, although Chris Terrio didn't work out so well for them, I liked it. But I think that Chris Terrio, like Julie Taymor with her Spider-Man Broadway production, was trying to pull the comics in a direction that interested them as non-comic book individuals, and I think that hurt some comic book fans' feelings, and they didn't like what the results were. So if Aaron Sorkin, he's going to have to play ball. He just can't write a comic book movie that interests him personally. I mean, it could partially interest him personally, but he has to keep an eye on making sure audiences like it as well. So, but if Aaron Sorkin could be convinced to do such a thing and to take the job seriously, if he wasn't just going to treat it as a paycheck gig and phone in a screenplay, I would consider paying him if I were DC. Also, just to get his name associated with the DCEU. But Marvel, I don't think Marvel needs him whatsoever. Unless they maybe wanted to consider him for a TV show, but then he wouldn't be meeting with Kevin Feige. And I don't know if that would be worth it either. He might be, maybe it is TV. I wonder if it is a TV deal, potentially. Because Aaron Sorkin, of course, The West Wing, and I think what Noah Hawley's done with Legion has been interesting, albeit not particularly commercially successful. But maybe that would interest Aaron Sorkin. So anyway, those are the top 2 stories of the day. Now the third story of the day, speaking of screenwriters, is a fantastic gossip story that happened, and a Hollywood Reporter picked it up, and I think it's a great story, but it's a cautionary tale to any of you or anyone who wants to get into the industry. So let me tell you what happened. All right. So there's 2 newbie screenwriters in Hollywood, and they're very frustrated because nobody will read their spec script, the Kosher Nostra. So Kosher Nostra, basically, that, a play on words there. But, they're substituting kosher. So they're very frustrated that nobody will read their screenplay, particularly because the people who are lower down, like assistants and stuff, say, I can't get my boss to read it, but I think it's pretty good. Good job. So what's the screenplay about? Well, it's about a struggling screenwriter who turns to be an Uber driver to support himself financially, and he ends up being a getaway driver for the Jewish mafia. Well, I'll tell you right there, this is dead in the water because Baby Driver was already doing this. It's already about a getaway driver who wants out. So you can't do the movie. It's just too similar. It's unfortunate, but maybe it could get them, if it really is that good. If it's that good, though, by the way, I'm surprised that they haven't been able to get an agent. But let me just finish the story. So they decided, what would be great? We really want Seth Rogen, Jonah Hill, James Franco, Aziz Ansari to be in our movie. In fact, we've named the characters after them. That's very desperate. Never do that. Never cast your own movie. It's the worst thing you can do. You could say you would like this person to play it, or you wrote it for an actor. Also, never write it for a specific actor, because if the actor says no, you're also dead in the water, right? You want to write it for a type of actor. You want to say, well, this type of actor could play it, right? But no, they're dead set on this group of actors who do make a lot of movies together, making their film, right? So not only are the characters named after them, they say, let's go one step further. Let's put a fake credit sheet on top of this and say that this script was actually written by Seth Rogen and his writing and producing partner, Evan Goldberg, and that the story was helped, give a story credit to Jonah Hill. Right? Oh, this is so bad. All right. So then make sure that it gets into the right hands, they make a fake UTA agent email address, and they copy and paste the UTA signature in the email onto their fake email so that it looks like a legit email from UTA. That's shocking that they would do that. Wow. So they get a hold of the email addresses for some top producers in town. Ted Sarandos and Scott Stuber from Netflix, Megan Ellison from Annapurna Pictures, who of course worked with Seth Rogen on Sausage Party, which is shocking that she wouldn't be aware of the correct channels that this would come through. Also Mark Gordon, who's a prolific producer. You might see the Gordon Company all the time credited. And then even Will Ferrell read it. Why would Will Ferrell? That's so weird. I think a lot of assistants for these people might be fired and or at least having a very stern talking to, because they're, again, the gatekeepers. So Seth Rogen found out about this, actually, and he and his team sent a legal letter, from their lawyers to these screenwriters, cease and desist. Stop sending material around town with our names on it. Now, these guys defended what they did, saying, hey, Spielberg, legend, Spielberg snuck onto the Universal lot. So this is what we're doing. And also, you might remember that, like, for instance, Mindy Kaling's very successful because she did that play about Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, whether or not they actually wrote Good Will Hunting. But that was like a legitimate play that was produced in the theater and got legit reviews and did very well. They had a gimmick, but it was a legit gimmick. And sneaking onto a studio lot, you couldn't do that today, by the way, either. You would get into a lot of trouble because of security issues. But sneaking onto a lot is quite different than not only, putting someone's name on your material, but then, that's so bad. Making up a fake agent. I mean, you can't get any agent to represent you in all of Hollywood, especially if people lower downs are reading your script and they do say it's good. But then the fact that you would dupe these people and then it would become publicly known because of the Hollywood Reporter picking up the story, I don't think they'll ever work. I think it was really, really a bad idea. And I would advise you, not to do those things. You know, people make it all the time. They break through. There are lots of ways to do it. We discuss it on the show all the time. You can enter writing competitions. You can go and do something else. You know, both, you know, Ava DuVernay, and I forget the name of the filmmaker, but the guy who did Dear White People, they both worked in PR, and then they transitioned into filmmaking. You can go to Sundance workshops, all kinds of ways, film school, and get representation correctly. So I think making somebody look stupid, particularly the person that you want to hire you, is a really bad idea. It's really bad. I mean, if their scripts are really good, anyone could submit to the blacklist these days. And if their script was really good, they could have just submitted to the blacklist and maybe gotten on there. I just think this was a very, very bad idea. And also, I think it shows an unpredictability that maybe won't go away, right? You don't want to get into business with somebody who would be willing to do a charade at this level. All right, so I'm very curious to what you think of that story as well. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, speaking of misconceptions and what people say, I have a viewer question. This is from Roscoe, but a couple of you actually have been asking me about this, and that's about, so this is what Roscoe said. I really don't like Amy Pascal's comments on Spider-Man movies after Spider-Man Homecoming. Bad move, Sony Pictures? What are your thoughts, Grace? He tweeted me. Well, Roscoe, I think it's worth discussing. So Amy Pascal has been doing the rounds of publicity, and she's been talking about how amazing it is that, you know, Sony, Marvel, and Disney are working together on Spider-Man Homecoming. And she said, oh, you know, we really felt, she said it was an unselfish situation where we just felt that Spider-Man belonged with the Avengers in Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, but I don't know if it's going to ever happen, if it will continue. She said it's very rare to see this in Hollywood. And I don't know if it will continue post the Spider-Man Homecoming sequel. Well, he's already going to be in Infinity War, so this is a lot of movies at this point already. So what is she saying? Does this mean that this is a ticking time bomb and we shouldn't get too attached to Spidey in the MCU? Well, yes and no. I think, you know, first of all, I'd like to point out that based on the leaked emails from the Sony hack, Amy Pascal has a history of speaking with little forethought and being fast and loose with her comments, right? And also not really sometimes getting the current Hollywood landscape and what properties are popular and why. All right, so let's remember that. The other thing is that it could be a negotiating tactic, right? Not only in terms of maybe getting a better deal with Marvel, and they have to, obviously the deal will end after the sequel, Spider-Man Homecoming sequel, so she's positioning already for that. Not only to maybe get a better deal, but maybe to make sure, like, to protect herself if Marvel doesn't want to continue, and also to maybe protect herself if Sony doesn't want to continue. Let's remember that. They're working very hard to build a Spider-Man cinematic universe outside of the MCU that has nothing to do with it, with Venom and the Silver Sable and Black Cat movie, and maybe they want to leave the door open for Tom Holland's Spider-Man to swing back in when he's done with the MCU. You know, they have to, I think Sony's going to have to see if this is, while it's very unselfish, they're going to want to make money off of it, and they're also going to want to see if they get any return. You know, there was a very mixed reaction to the Spider-Man Homecoming trailer. DCEU fans came after it hard. So we'll see. And also Spider-Man, of course, has a very rocky history itself as a franchise, as a film franchise. So let's see if it's worth sharing the profits with the MCU if the profits aren't that big, right? If Sony's like, well, that didn't really make that big of a difference, so Marvel's getting all, I wonder if they probably get some change from Civil War and Infinity War, but they might be like, you know, it's more money to us to swing this guy back into our little pocket Spider-Man universe we've created on the side here. Let's end the Marvel deal. So I think what it really means is this is a wonderful little moment. Let's all enjoy it, but we're all waiting to see how this experiment works out, right? Make no mistake, it is an experiment and it has an end date, and we're going to then decide whether or not to renew. All parties will decide that. So that's just what I think the situation is. I think it was a mess. I like the way the Spider-Man Homecoming movie looks, but I have to say, distancing myself from it from not Grace Randolph the moviegoer, but Grace Randolph commenting on business. I don't know if it was worth the deal. I think it's a little bit tricky. I don't know how much, it's hard for me to tell, it's hard for anyone to tell how much Spider-Man factored into the success of Captain America Civil War. It certainly did help with the publicity, to be honest. But I don't know in the long run if it's going to end up being an Achilles heel for the MCU. Sony is again infamous for how they handle their franchises. So we'll just see. We'll see what happens. We'll see how. I'm very curious. I think the answer will be how Spider-Man Homecoming performs at the box office. I think that's a big question mark, and we'll have to see if it performs like a Sony Spider-Man movie or like a Marvel MCU movie. That's going to be the big difference. But you know, don't get too worried about this because it's so far away. Because you have Spider-Man Homecoming, he's in both Infinity War movies, and then you also have the Spider-Man Homecoming sequel that they're contracted obviously to do. So don't worry about it. That's a long way away. All right. So I think that's just what it is. And maybe Amy Pascal should be a little more careful before she does interviews if she's going to continue to do them. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories, Roscoe's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.